Dropping Dimes Foundation is founded in 2014. They're trying to help former ABA players that we spoke weeks ago with Len Elmore. We did a special with Antonio Rodriguez about the ABA. Some of that players didn't have any pension and they need some help. Scott Tarter, CEO of Dropping Dimes Foundation, co-founder, is with us. Scott, tell us, we talking with Antonio Rodriguez, a journalist that he's like a freak of ABA and NBA, and he told us about all the history of the league and how the merge, kind of merge,
Yes.
it was. And he told us that at the time that there were promises of pensions and the way of the contracts of the ABA players were. Len Elmore told us that he went to Indiana because they offered him more years and more money, even if that money is after his retirement. Nowadays, a lot of those ABA players didn't see a dollar of that pensions. Is that the reason you founded the Dropping Dimes Foundation?
Yes, very much so, at least in part. And thank you for having me on to discuss this important issue, Manu. The Dropping Dimes Foundation stemmed from discussions that I had with my good friend at the time, Mel Daniels, who played at the same time as Len Elmore. He played in the ABA from 1967 until the end of the ABA, and then he played a few games for the Nets in the NBA, but not many. Mm-hmm. And Mel would always talk to me about the fact that when the merger occurred, as you alluded to, it was not a true merger. I mean, in reality, the NBA won the war, the war between the two competing leagues, and to the winner go the spoils. So the NBA knew that at the time, the ABA teams were folding very quickly and going out of business because of finances. Mm-hmm. So in the final year of the league, for example, the Baltimore Claws, they went out of business after 3 preseason games and never even made it to the regular season. The Utah Stars went out of business and stopped operating in the middle of the season. The same with the Virginia Squires. So it was kind of a bloodbath from a business standpoint. The NBA had won, the ABA was falling apart. And so the merger is a misconception. It was not a merger. It was the NBA acquiring the Nets, the Nuggets, the Spurs, and the Pacers. Mm-hmm. And they did this by having these teams pay a very significant amount of money. Each team had to pay $1 million. They had to give up draft rights for a few years going into the NBA, which kept them, from becoming successful teams in those early years. And they also had to give up a part of their television revenues to the Spirits of St. Louis, mm-hmm. who also ultimately ended up going out of business and not going into the NBA. Mm-hmm. And the same for the Kentucky Colonels, only their owner, John Y. Brown, he took money instead of the lucrative television deal that the Selna brothers took. So this is the landscape at the time in 1975 and 76. So the players who were playing in the ABA, you can imagine, they're playing on teams whose owners are losing money and their teams fail. So whether it's deferred compensation that Len Elmore was talking about, or pensions, mm-hmm. or healthcare benefits, these are all going away because the teams who offered these contracts were going out of business. Yep. One by one, they all went out of business. And then the NBA knew that there was no reason for it to take responsibility for the pensions or healthcare benefits for those players, because their perspective was they had won this war. So they made the 4 teams pay to come into the NBA. Mm-hmm. And they said to the ABA, you must take on all of the liability for the deferred compensation on player contracts like Mr. Elmore and for the pension benefits. But the problem we see, and that I saw as an attorney, at that time talking to Mel, was that's not fair, right? I mean, you businessmen knew that when you said the ABA as a league would have the responsibility for deferred compensation and pensions, they knew this would not happen. Mm-hmm. The players did not know. All that the players were told was that in the merger, they would be taken care of. They would receive the same pensions as the NBA players, and they would receive healthcare benefits.
And that's the reason why almost they have no no many players said no to the we call it merger, but it's like absorption of the ABA, because they were told lies, basically.
Yes, they were told lies, and who told the lies is unknown, right? I mean, it could have been a number of people. If you think about the dynamics at that time, was it someone from the NBA? David Stern was the lawyer for the NBA at the time. I have no way of demonstrating that he said anything, that was not true. The ABA as a league, maybe. I have no way of knowing. The teams themselves, and it could have even been some of the players who were set to benefit, right? Because you had players who were part of the Players Association in the ABA who were about to sign lucrative contracts in the NBA. Mm-hmm. So interests were very different between the various parties. And so we'll never know the answer to that. But what we do know is that the average ABA player was treated very unfairly in that process.
Mm-hmm. I read a David Stern interview from years ago that he was saying, I wasn't the NBA commissioner at that time, but as you said, he was the lawyer of the NBA. David Stern didn't just appear like a commissioner in 1984.
Yes, that's right. And at the time, there was a lot of bad blood between the NBA and the ABA. I think the players, they enjoyed each other. They played charity games at that time period with each other. So there were a number of charity games that went to benefit African American, NAACP, poverty, and the players from both leagues would come together. Can you imagine that today? And they would play unsanctioned all-star games, and they would raise money for these very good causes, right? But the NBA and the ABA didn't like this very much because they didn't have control over that. And the players could negotiate for very high salaries because they had two different leagues that they could negotiate with. So you might have been drafted by the Virginia Squires in the ABA and the New York Knicks in the NBA, and you got to go to both of them and say, okay, well, which one will pay me more? Mm-hmm. And when the ABA died, this all ended. So there was a lot of money to be had to consolidate the leagues into one, but the money to be had was really by the owners and the league, ultimately of the NBA.
Mm-hmm. The big fish always wins.
Yes.
There are a lot of ABA players that then go to the NBA, but some of the more veterans didn't arrive to the league, and some of them just play a few seasons. We are talking about pensions, and maybe because here in Spain we have the universal healthcare, at least at the moment. For the moment we have it, and it's hard to us to imagine what is not to have a healthcare insurance. So maybe it's not a secondary issue that over the pensions is as important as that. We have to take care that we are talking about a league that it was from 69 to 76. So all the guys that play in that league are quite old.
Yes. At this point, we know the answers to that because we've been at the Dropping Dimes Foundation. We've been, aggressively seeking some type of pension benefit. So we know there are only, you must have eligibility requirements, right? If someone only played 2 games in the league, it would be hard to argue that they should receive lifetime benefits, right? Mm-hmm. But in the NBA, if you played 3 full seasons in the NBA, then you're entitled to an NBA pension. So we start from there and say, if you played 3 seasons in the ABA, no matter when you played it, then you should be receiving a pension. Yeah. There are only 120 approximately players who are still living who fall into this category. Then you have to take a look at that a little further and say, okay, well, some players like, some of the big name stars, some of the Hall of Famers, they played more years in the NBA than they played in the ABA. And maybe some of them played the full 10 years in the NBA, which would qualify them for the highest NBA pension. But then you have others that are more problematic. What if a player played 3 years in the NBA and received an NBA pension, but he played 6 or 7 years in the ABA? Our position is that if you played 3 years in the ABA, you should receive a pension, period.
And we are at one point that you say there are 120 players that are still alive. We are talking about the NBA, a league that moves hundreds of millions of dollars. From outside, it's like, is this a issue of ego or of maybe proud?
Yes. Well, Manu, you hit the nail on the head, as we say here in America, right? Because again, these leagues were very fierce competitors, and they played against each other in the 1970s. The ABA and the NBA teams played against each other in preseason games. And at the end of the 4-year period that they did this, the ABA won more games head to head than the NBA. When the first year after the merger, then 10 of the 24 All-Stars in the NBA All-Star game were ABA players.
Yeah.
The three-point shot comes from the ABA. The All-Star Slam Dunk competition comes from the ABA. The first year after the merger, the Portland Trailblazers were playing the Sixers for the NBA Finals, and 5 of the 10 starters in the game came from the ABA. So the NBA, certainly there's an ego issue there, because the ABA was a very powerful league with incredibly good talent. So, these players are now in their late 60s to their 70s or 80s.
Yep.
And the NBA fines are equal $200 to $300 million a year. And to fund this pension would cost maybe $20 or $25 million total, not per year, total.
I read a tweet last week or something. I don't remember who wrote it. It's like NBA cares, but not of ABA players.
Yes, and someone asked me once, Manu. Someone asked me, why does the Dropping Dimes Foundation take this position? Because the ABA lost, right? I mean, they were a competing league, and the NBA won. And the NBA does not have a legal obligation to pay the pensions. And I made the argument I just made. And I said, well, on the other hand, if you're going to hold yourself out as a social justice oriented league, and you're going to hold yourself out as a league that cares, as your reference pointed out, then how can you deny the significant impact the ABA had on the value of the ABA as a business? And how can you forget the history of how these guys were left out of the so-called merger, and the NBA benefited so much? Then why do you not take care of these pioneers who meant so much to not only your history, but the actual value of the game that is played today? Because today's games, I saw ABA games. I'm an old guy. And I'm telling you, my sons, when I showed them old clips, they say, they don't play defense. They just run and shoot 3-point shots. And I said, what do you think happens today?
Yeah. The actual basketball, the NBA that we have today, it owes a lot from the ABA. We talked with Antonio Rodriguez. You said it before. The 3-point line, the spaces that they are created with the 3-point shoot. So you can go to the basket and make all that dunks.
Yes.
It wouldn't exist without the ABA.
No, it really would not. I mean, the people forget that the NBA game in the 60s and 70s, the ABA had to compete with this, and they decided they would make the game more entertaining. They would free up the athletes to run more. They would allow the athletes to focus on their own individuality on the playing floor and off the playing floor. This is why you saw the big afros, you saw jewelry, You saw not, nice flashy clothes. And in the NBA, it was all business, banker suits, they look like accountants or lawyers or bankers, all dressed the same way with very conservative suits. Their hair had to be cut, no facial hair. And the NBA game itself was a very slow and methodical, game that was designed to get it to the center.
It's like if the ABA was a league run by the players and the NBA run by the owners.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. And the ABA players will tell you that because many of these players had the opportunity to play in either the NBA or the ABA. And many of them will tell you it's because the ABA paid more money. Mm-hmm. But at the time, we're talking about $16,000 versus $15,000, right? So we have to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
But they will also say they wanted to have fun. They wanted to play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You are in Indiana, and tell us, what are you doing in Dropping Dimes Foundation? I guess you are in touch with the NBA and trying to pay justice to those former players.
Yes, that's right. Yes. For many years, we tried to reach out to the NBA, but we were not successful. But recently, the NBA is talking to us at a very high level, and we are exchanging information about eligibility, issues that are important to resolving this. And they have indicated that they are, now interested in trying to resolve the issue. Mm-hmm. We feel two things at the Dropping Dimes Foundation. For one, we're grateful that they are at the table now and they are talking about this, but we want it to happen because even as we have been discussing this with the NBA, we've had players die, players who would have been eligible for a pension. We have players right now who are extremely sick and who probably will not be alive to take advantage of the pension when it does happen. So we still are saying, we love that you're at the table. We're grateful, but let's do this fast. Let's get this in place. To us, it's not complicated. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing we want to keep in mind at Dropping Dimes is we will still have all of the former ABA players who did not play 3 years, and many of them are still in need of assistance as well. So we'll continue to take care of them.
Mm-hmm. We have to remember that everybody can donate in your website, droppingdimes.org. So
yes, thank you. And I want to emphasize, Manu, if I can, that unlike many organizations, the Dropping Dimes Foundation was founded on the principle that every penny that comes into the organization from donors, because donors tend to be basketball fans, we want every single penny to go to the players. And so in order to do that, we rent space for free. We do not pay for any rent. We do not pay legal fees. We only work with my law firm that provides only pro bono free legal services. Mm-hmm. We've worked with other law firms in other states, only if they do not charge. The same with an accounting firm, no charge. Everything has to be done for the players. So we have no one gets paid on our foundation board. We have no paid staff. So this is important, I think, for your listeners to know. Even the co-founders, John Abrams and myself, if we have a fundraiser and we have to spend money for the fundraiser, very different from other organizations, we will donate money ourselves to pay for the expenses of the. So there's if your listeners want to donate to the Dropping Dimes Foundation, their money will go directly to the players.
Mm-hmm. You have a board in which you have famous players like Julius Erving, George Gervin, Spencer Haywood, also not ABA players like Reggie Miller, and I see Miles Turner. I see that the Indiana Pacers are collaborating with you as a former ABA team. I guess it's different for them.
I'm very proud of this, of course, as you can imagine. I'm very proud because being in Indiana, we're known throughout the United States still as sort of a hotbed for basketball and basketball history. And I'm very proud of the fact that the Indiana Pacers were in 5 of the ABA finals, and they won 3 ABA finals. So they were the most successful ABA team, and they were like a family. And so they continue to be like this. So Reggie Miller was very good friends with Mel Daniels. And so he is very interested in continuing to support, and he supports the foundation a lot. He never wants to take credit, but he supports us a great deal. And Miles Turner feels that same sense of history. And then on our board, we have George McGinnis, the great Hall of Famer from the Indiana Pacers and the Philadelphia 76ers. And of course, Mel Daniels was on the board until his death. And we also have Bob Nedelicki, a great Indiana Pacer great, 4-time All-Star, and the great coach, Slick Leonard. So Dropping Dimes is very much composed of Indiana Pacers.
Because I see in every interview that I read or see or listen with former ABA players that is between them there is like a brotherhood that maybe we don't see it with former NBA players.
I think you're very right about that. I just sat in last weekend. I sat in on an interview between Darnell Hillman of the former Indiana Pacers, the great dunking champion, and Larry Jones, who was a 5-time ABA All-Star. And the two of them were fierce competitors on the court, and they even trash talked each other at their age. They're now, let's see, Larry would be in his mid 70s and Darnell is 70, but they still trash talk. And they really, they went at it. It was entertaining. But then when they finished, it was nothing but love and respect. And they talked about the brotherhood of the ABA and that there's nothing quite like it. Nothing quite like it. And there's the players, I don't know if you know this, but the players are supporting a business for the ABA called Lana Sports. It's LANA sports.com. And the players are supporting this and bringing back the ABA basketball, ABA trading cards, ABA memorabilia, all by ABA players in support of ABA players. And that's I don't think that's ever been done before.
About what you were talking about, the trash talking is like when somebody mess with your brother and you said, wait, he's a son of a bitch, but it's mine son of a bitch.
Yes. Can I if you said that, then can I tell you an actual quote?
Yeah.
So an actual quote, and I'm going to say this, I'm even going to say who the players are, because one was Mel Daniels, and the person he was talking about was his very best friend, Bob Nedelicki. Okay. And Bob Nedelicki and I are very good friends today. And Bob spoke at Mel's funeral. So did I. We were both pallbearers, for Mel. And I was talking to Mel one day, and he said, because Nedo can be pretty crazy. And I said, Mel, you seem very laid back and very, very gentlemanlike, very, very big. He's he was a big man, a very strong man, but he was very gentle. And I said, but Nedo, he's crazy. He's crazy. He says anything he wants. And how did you become friends? And Mel said, well, listen, we won 2 ABA championships together. We were teammates for 7 years. He said, Neto is an asshole, but he's my asshole. Right?
It's like that. It's like that. You talk about the ABA basketball. I saw that we can get the it's official ABA basketball in your web.
Yeah.
I say it again, droppingdimes.org. And if it's a tricolor basketball that now we know it, and the young people that are listening to us will know it for the 3-point contest, but it comes from the ABA. And also we have to remember that if we have an NBA logo, it's because of the ABA, because they want to have a trademark with the 3 colors, with the blue, the red, and the white, and compete with the ABA.
Yes, that's right. That's exactly right. And there's a reason that Moneyball is still there in the NBA, right? And so yes, we did bring back the original basketball, the original, George Mikan style basketball from the ABA. So it's a lot of fun to play with because of the the rotation and the colors. It's fun to play with.
Normally in English you say that some things is not a matter of if but a matter of when. In this case more than ever, it's a matter of when. Because what you said before, these former ABA players are getting old, and we need it now.
Yes.
Can you tell me an exclusive?
Yes, I can. So, well, two things. One, if I could, very quickly, because a lot of times people will ask us at the Dropping Dimes Foundation, they confuse the ABA players for the salaries that are made by the NBA players, right? So I have to remind them that in the 1960s and 70s, when the ABA existed, no television contracts, no internet, no streaming. Merchandise was very, very small and local. So basically all the revenue came from gate receipts, from ticket sales, and from programs, right? So these guys were paid anywhere from $10,000 a year to maybe in the first year, $10 to $15 or $16,000 a year. So they had second jobs, many of them. So they didn't make a lot of money and then go blow it. They never made big money. So that's first, foremost. What we help them out with are things like utility bills, housing, clothing, medical bills, prescription drug costs. So again, these are basic life necessities that we help them out with.
Yes, we have to remember that this is not that we want to help rich people. No, this is charity. This is charity. Yeah. It's as hard as that. It's charity.
Yes. We had one player, and I won't name him out of respect. He's dead now. But we had one player who we helped, who was heating his very small house. He could not pay his electric bills, so the electricity was shut off, and so he was buying kerosene, little bottles of kerosene to heat one room, and he ended up having many of his toes amputated. We paid for his utilities. We got him an electric wheelchair. He passed away shortly after. So these are basic needs that these guys have. And then as far as the exclusive, maybe I can tell you this, okay, because I haven't told any other media this. I mean, the most recent communication we had with the NBA was just this week on Monday. And they are continuing to discuss with us the overall issue. But I personally was very gratified because we are at the stage now where we are exchanging very specific information about the players who would be eligible. So we're now down to very, very fine details. So I believe there will be an announcement made before the end of this season.
Oh, great. I hope so.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we just can let you our show to whatever you need, and you have our doors open. And remember, droppingdimes.org. You are also in Twitter, and so we will follow all the news. Scott, it was great having you in our show. Let me tell you, whenever we have an announcement, we will have you back. It's okay for
Excellent. You? Thank you, Manu, for putting me on the show. We appreciate it, and thank you for shedding light on this very, very important issue. Okay, it's very important, so thank you.
Thank you very much.